Okay, so good afternoon, grade 10R. I am beyond grateful to finally have my time with you with this lesson. Although we have to do it asynchronously, no, today, but anyway, we would still make the best out of this modality that we're having today. Okay, so before anything else, I would like to introduce myself. I am teacher Urquiola or Sir Urquiola, and I'm going to be your English teacher for today. Now, for the requirement for today's video lesson, there's only one, and that would be your learning activity sheet. I've attached it last Monday on my preparatory as one of my preparatory materials for this lesson today. Okay, so here are some of the guidelines for that learning activity sheet. So have it printed out on a long band paper. So if you're done doing that, then you're most likely set for this video lesson. Have it with you during our asynchronous session today, as you will be tasked to answer a portion of it until it is completed at the end of the video lesson. So its deadline of submission is on November 17 at 9 p.m. You need to take a picture of your completed LAS and attach it on the assignment that I have assigned to you in our stream. Okay, so those are the basic guidelines for your LAS or learning activity sheet. It looks like this one here, so if you have not printed it out yet, you may go to the announcement that I made last Monday and then print this one out, okay? So we shall now proceed to our very first task for this video lesson, and I know you already know what our topic is all about. But for our task number one, it is named Fight Against Me, no? So I want all of you to focus on the statement given here. It says students shall be allowed to use their smartphones during classes without their teacher's interference. Now let's say that I agree to this statement and you disagree with the statement. Now, I'm going to give you my points of explanation as to why I agree with the statement. And after giving my points of explanation, you have to pause the video and then write on your LAS why would you disagree with the statement, okay? So you don't need to record yourself reciting the speech. You just have to write it down on your LAS. Okay, so let's proceed to the points of explanation I have, okay, as to why I agree. So in the framework for 21st century learning, or for the framework for 21st century learners, one of the skills there was information, media, and technology skills. These skills are expected for learners of this century to achieve through their teachers' incorporation of such skills in their lessons. Now, why is it always the case that teachers forbid us to use our phones during classes? As someone who agrees, I submit that I agree with the statement that says we should be allowed to use our smartphones during classes without our teacher's interference, based on one major point, and that is technology should be available when we need its assistance. Our smartphones allow us to access incessant information that can surely help us grasp the concepts we deal in every lesson, in every class better, that we may find difficult. Furthermore, the use of smartphones in such meaningful way does not only assist us with our learning, but it also hone and expose us to technological dilemmas, where our information, media, and technology skills or technological skills are challenged and therefore improved. So those are my points of explanation as to why I would agree to this statement. Now it's your turn. Have your answer in 3 to 5 sentences. Okay, so pause the video and then play it back after you're done. Okay, so now that you're done, let's proceed to a couple of questions. Okay, so what do you think is our lesson for today? So if you're thinking it's debate, you're probably know how to read our preparatory materials. Very good. Our lesson today is all about, or it's gonna revolve around debates. Now, when we debate, or in the task that we just did there, in task number 1, what act is emphasized, or what act is involved in our activity earlier? If your answer is argue or arguing, then you're right, In debates, we argue, or the debaters do argue, on a certain topic. Okay, so arguing or argue. Now, going back to this, or focusing on this act, argue. Can you tell me the difference amongst argue and its other related inflections? We have argument and argumentation. Okay, let's define each of these. Argue is the act of expressing disagreement and providing reasons to support or oppose something. So in the activity, it was our act of agreeing and disagreeing to the statement, right? So that's argue. When we say argument, these are the statements presented to support or oppose a point of view. So the reasons that I gave you as to why I agree to the statement, those are my arguments. And the ones you have written there in your last are probably also your arguments as to why you disagree with the statement earlier. Now for argumentation, it is the process of developing or presenting arguments, often structured logically to persuade an audience. So it talks about the process. So if we were in the face-to-face class, we would have done another round where I would say my point of view again and probably disprove your arguments, and then you would do the same. So if that cycle happens, it is the process of argumentation. So we're talking about the process already of throwing arguments and arguing in general, okay? Now, in other definition here, argumentation is the art of presenting reasons to arrive at a truth that is acceptable to others. So it's really the process, the art of presenting reasons, presenting arguments, so that we can be able to settle a particular debatable topic, for example. Okay, so that's argumentation. Now, focusing on the process of argumentation, let me ask this question. Can its process be only seen in a debate? If your answer is yes, that's not correct. Because no, argumentation, the process of argumentation cannot only be seen in a debate. It can also be seen, well, let's talk about its forms first, okay? When it comes to argumentation, we have formal argumentation and informal argumentation. Now, for each of these forms, there are also examples, For example, for our formal argumentation, we have debates, essays, job interview, speeches, research defense. If you were able to recognize or distinguish what are somehow, if you compare all of these, what are their commonality? Well, it's more structured, Debates are structured. You just don't argue and overlap with the other speaker, of course, Someone says something and then the other speaker would say something. For your essay, I mean, you have to have your hook, your thesis statement, and you also have to align your topic sentences to that thesis statement, so it's structured, It refers, or it has something to do, the formality has something to do with its format and its structure. Now for informal, I think you can already know, why is it informal? What are these examples for informal? We have family discussion, movie night choice, road trip planning, social media posts, and selling used stuffs. So all of these examples are not structured. Like for example, family discussion, if you're asking for an increase in your allowance, I mean, it doesn't really require you to be structured, in your argumentation. You just have to convince your parent or your guardian, So it's not structured at all compared to the formal argumentation, examples of formal argumentation. I think there's no much that we can elaborate on this, because I know you already know the difference, no? So let's proceed to why study argumentation. So its process trains us to persuade others and to resist being persuaded by others. A person who is familiar with the methods of argumentation is not likely to be carried away by unwise arguments. Of course, that's the nature or the main goal of argumentation. Okay, so we have to persuade others, and we also have to resist being persuaded by others by knowing the difference of those arguments that are wise and unwise. Okay, now let's proceed to the elements that your arguments must have, and there are two. We have conviction and persuasion. When we say conviction, we convince, and this should pertain to the logic and correct reasoning of our argument. Okay, so it refers to the facts that we present. Okay, so we convince them with factual information. When we say persuasion, we persuade, and therefore we appeal more onto the emotion of our audience, perhaps. Okay, so persuasion, when we persuade, we appeal to their emotion, the emotional aspect of that particular argument. Okay, now let's answer the question: should we only have one of them in our argument, or should we have both? The answer is both are necessary to any argument, for the reasons that an argument does not merely persuade others to accept the truth. I mean, we just don't convince people, our audience, to accept the truth, but we also have to persuade them to act in accordance with the truth they present. Okay, so they were given this factual information, and of course we also have to call them for action to do something now that they know these pieces of information. Okay, so we appeal both to the logic and correct reasoning of the argument, and we also appeal to the emotional aspect of the argument. Okay, so we use both, but there is a correct proportion of it. We cannot just these examples here further justify why do we need to have both instead of just one. Okay, so let's have the correct proportion. No? When it comes to, for example, what if we only use conviction? Here is an example regarding recycling. Recycling should be mandatory because it reduces landfill waste, conserves resources, and lowers carbon emissions. Well, yes, there is a call for action. There's making recycling mandatory. There's a proposition, is what I meant. And then we have all of these factual information that we can perhaps be supported by research, right? But it doesn't appeal to emotional aspect, right? It leaves you with a question. I mean, what do we do about this information? What should we do to help? What should we do to make it, or what should drive us to make it mandatory? No, so those questions, are left unanswered by your audience. So what if we only use persuasion? Imagine our beaches covered in trash and wildlife suffering. We must make recycling mandatory to protect our planet. Okay, so there is still the proposition of getting recycling as mandatory, no? But it appeals to the emotion or the imagination, right? From the word imagine there. But it doesn't give the audience some factual information that would drive them to really believe that there is a need for recycling to be mandatory, because you're just asking them to imagine, right? So although you appeal to the emotion, but you lacked factual information that you should use for them to be able to really have this idea, or this how would you say this strong feeling that they have to push for recycling to be mandatory. Now let's have an example wherein the two is used. Okay, the two is used. So we have here recycling should be mandatory to reduce waste and pollution, conserve resources, and ensure a cleaner, sustainable world for future generations. Well, the first one, it still has the proposition to make recycling mandatory, and then we have the convincing aspects of it. We have to reduce waste and pollution and conserve resources and ensure, for the last one, and ensure a cleaner, sustainable world for future generations. That pertains actually, or that appeals to the emotion of the audience already. Why? Because of course, if it involves them, no, the effect of the proposition being passed affects them because they are part of this world, diba? So it somehow persuades them. It persuades them to do the action, to push for this proposition, to go for it, no? Whilst also having the convincing aspect. Now we have these problems, and this is what we can do. And now you're also giving them the reason as to why we should do it. Okay, so just correct balance lang yun of conviction or persuasion. We cannot use either of them in our arguments. We have to use both of them. Although, again, I would also add all of these advices as to how you would proportionately proportionate these two correctly in your argument. Okay, so use more of this, use more of conviction if the audience is an intelligent and highly educated group. Okay, so if they're highly educated, then you convince them more than to persuade them. I'm not saying that you shouldn't persuade them anymore. So you just use more conviction. Okay, use more of conviction if the audience is favorably disposed toward the question. So if you can see that they're more, they have the bias already that they approve with the argument that you're giving them, then you convince more, no? Instead of just persuading them or persuading them more, no? Because there's no need for you to persuade them already because they're already in favor with your argument. We have persuasion. Use more of it if the audience is hostile, of course, no? If they're a bit aggressive towards the argument you're telling them, then you might have to appeal to their emotion more. Okay, and then use more of this action if action is desired. Okay, so use persuasion more if you really want to call out your audience to do an action, a certain action, no, in accordance to the factual information or factual based dilemmas, no, that involved in your argument. Okay, so those are pieces of advice, no, that you can take as to how you would proportionately or how you would correctly proportion these two in your argument, in writing your argument. Okay, so now we're done with argumentation. We're done with the first part. We will now proceed to the best part of this lesson, which I think, or I would assume that most of you are excited about. Let's proceed to debate. So I want you to go to your LAS and then answer this question. What makes a debate debate? That's it. That's how simple it is. So just define debate in 2 to 3 sentences, and you may pause the video for a second, and then after you're done defining it, you play it back. Okay? So now that you're done answering, let's compare your answer to the definition that I have here about debate. So debate is a formal type of argumentation carried out by two opposing sides and conducted according to certain well-defined rules. It's our goal to overthrow error in someone's arguments to establish the fact or truth. Now let's proceed to the types of debate. So this is where it becomes tricky because we will be dealing with 3 types of debate. Now let's proceed to the matrix that I have given you as one of the preparatory materials for this lesson. Okay, so we have here, we'll be talking about Lincoln-Douglas debate. We also have Oregon-Oxford debate, and we also have parliamentary debate. Okay, so we'll be dealing with these 3 types of debate. So let's go for the first one, let's have the nature of these three, okay? So let's have Lincoln-Douglas debate. So it focuses on the conflicting values of social and philosophical issues, for example, by examining questions of morality, justice, democracy, etc. Okay, so when it comes to Lincoln-Douglas debate, you have to remember that it's value-driven. Okay, it's more on identifying if something is morally correct or if it's immoral. Okay, so that's basically the nature of LD debate. Let's have Oregon-Oxford debate. So it is a traditional yet highly structured debate format used in elementary governors debate, house debate, high school debate, collegiate debate, and all over the country. So basically, we use it here, especially here in the Philippines. When it comes to Oregon-Oxford debate, this is a combination of forensic debate and Oxford debate. These two debates are also different from each other, but for this format, they use both the elements of these Oregon or forensic debate and Oxford debate. Let's have parliamentary debate. So in general, it refers to the idea that when a motion is brought before the House, discussion should take a certain format so that the playing field is fair. Now, when it comes to the parliamentary debate, it's more on the idea. It's not just all about having the affirmative and the negative. No, we're also considering here the position of the debaters. So it is actually the debate is between the government or the governing bodies and the opposition, which can be represented by minorities. So by highlighting the playing field is fair here means that we are also considering the views and opinions of the government whilst also hearing the views and opinions of the minorities. Okay, so that's the idea of parliamentary debate. Now let's proceed to the number of debaters involved and their roles. For LD debates, we have one-on-one. Now we have the affirmative speaker and the negative speaker. So it's one-on-one, okay? We have Oregon-Oxford debate. We have 4-on-4, so 4 on each side or each team. So one speaker is assigned, which will have the burden to prove why the resolution is necessary, one for beneficiality or why is it beneficial to negate it or to affirm it, and why is it practical for the same burden. And then we also have the team captain who is assigned to give the rebuttal speech. Okay, for parliamentary debate we have 4-on-4 as well, but we have the government and the opposition, which can be represented by the minorities. So you have it there. And then for parliamentary debate, it is quite tricky, because they are further divided into 4 teams. So you might have to look on your matrix and read this part so that it would be much clearer for you, because I'm gonna skip it for now because it's gonna be a long one. Okay, so that's also why I've assigned this to you as preparatory materials for you to be able to read it in advance. So let's proceed to the facilitators of the debate and their roles. When it comes to the LD debate, there is no need for a facilitator, but if needed, they can have the judge or the chair. Is it the chair? No, moderator. So the debaters time themselves. They don't need a timer. A person who times the speakers. Okay. For Oregon-Oxford, we have the debate moderator. And the debate moderator is also a different person from the timer. They really have a timer, someone who would warn the speakers that they already have like 1 minute left in their speaking time. So that's for the Oregon-Oxford. And for parliamentary, they have the chair, and the chair is also responsible for timing the speakers. They usually have like 7 minutes. That's all for the facilitators of the debates and their roles. Okay, so let's proceed to the overview of the flow of the debate. Let's have the LD debate. And I want you to refer to your matrix again for the time of each speaking, time for each speaking order, no? Because it varies, okay? For LD debate, you can check for the prep time and the speaking time of each debater here. So, of course, the affirmative presents his constructive speech, and then we have cross-examination, and then negatives constructive speech, and then cross-examination again of the negative by the affirmative, okay? So there's a one-on-one naman sila, no? So you would already know who would do the cross-examination. And then at the very last part, we have rebuttals of the two debaters, okay? So that's how simple, no? Simple na dyan nilang flow, no? It's one-on-one. And again, they argue on the value. Let's have Oregon-Oxford. Okay, for Oregon-Oxford debates, we have quite of a lengthy one, no? Because the first speakers will prove the burden of the first burden here, which is necessity. And then the second speakers for the beneficiality, third for the practicability, and then the last ones to speak are the team captains who will give their rebuttal speech. Okay, so I think you already have an idea with this one, because this is used by many debate competitions, and this is the format that we will be using for your performance task as well. So please be aware of this flow, okay? Now let's proceed to parliamentary debate. Now we have the opening and the closing. We have the opening and closing speaking order. So for the opening, we have the Prime Minister and the Leader of Opposition. Leader of Opposition is represented by the minorities, okay? Prime Minister is from the governing bodies. We also have the Deputy Prime Minister and then Deputy Leader of Opposition. And to close the arguments established by the first speakers, we have the Member of Argument and then Member of Opposition, Government Whip, Opposition Whip. Okay, so they actually have 15 minutes as their preparation time, and they cannot access the internet whilst preparing their speech. And they have the speaking time 7 minutes. Okay, so that's for parliamentary debate. Now let's proceed to the content of each debater's speeches. Of course, this is also very important that you should also know the nature of the speeches, okay? For LD debate, they have, again, the value, criterion, and contentions. This refers to the constructive speech yet, okay? I've defined this in your matrix again, so you just have to go over the matrix and then you'll definitely get the idea as to what are these. But when we say value, it's the most important, or it's your goal, okay? It's the thing that you want to achieve in that particular debate. So for example, you would have freedom, justice, safety. Again, value-driven. Then we have criterion. So for criterion, it refers to how will the value be achieved. Okay, so how will you be able to achieve that value? So for example, if your value is freedom, then your criterion would be common good. Okay, and we also have contentions. Contentions, you can have 2 to 3 contentions. Okay, so the contentions refers to the arguments that you would say, or you would present to the audience, or to the opposing side, as to why your criterion and your value is more, or should be more prioritized than the opposing team. No? So contentions is just another term for your arguments. No? You have to prove why your value and your criterion should be prioritized than the other, or of the opposing team. No? So that's LD debate. For Oregon-Oxford, we're talking about here the constructive speeches palang ha. So we have, of course, they have to argue on the necessity, the beneficiality, and practicability. No? So each speaker will have that burden. No? So first speaker, necessity, radyo na sila. Second speakers, they have to prove the beneficiality, and then third, and so on. And for the team captain, he has the rebuttal, okay? For parliamentary debate, let's leave it not discussed yet, no? Let's have the cross-examination and interpellation first, because the two LD debate and Oregon-Oxford debate have cross-examination or interpellation. So cross-examination or interpellation is where each debater asks the opposing side questions regarding their affirmation or negation to the resolution. The intent of the questions may be to clarify points, to expose errors, to obtain admissions, to set up arguments, to save preparation time, and or to show off to judges your dynamism or the debater's dynamism. When it comes to cross-examination, it involves questioning, okay? It involves questioning, and usually the questions asked are categorical in nature. But when it comes to cross-examination, usually the speakers go for the idea that they want to let the opposing team admit that the stand that they are defending is not correct, and they should side to their side that they're defending. You know, so to obtain admissions, that's usually the purpose, or that's usually the goal that the debaters go for when it comes to cross-examination. Let's have rebuttal. Okay, so this is where the debater responds to the arguments made by their opposing team. So they will try to counter, disprove, or weaken the side's points to strengthen their own case. When it comes to rebuttal, it's more on sentences, of course. No, it's more on arguments, no rebuttal. It's not questioning. You really disprove. You take the arguments of the opposing side and then you attack it, you criticize it, you disprove it, you counter it. No, so that's rebuttaling. For LD debates, no, we have here the affirmative and then the negative. Just go over this in your matrix or in this PPT here. No, you would get the idea. No, how rebuttal is done in LD debates. And for Oregon Oxford, which I think I have to go for, no. For the team captain who is assigned to give the rebuttal speech, may follow the following advice and may answer the following questions in writing the speech. Okay, so you have all of this. No, just read all of these pointers here. This can help the team captain to craft his speech during because they are the last one to give the speech, right? So they have to rebuttal. They have to re-establish the arguments that were made by his or her teammates, no, so that they would be they have to prove that they should win that debate. Okay, now for the parliamentary debate, no, I want all of you to just go to your matrix again. I'm gonna ask you to read your matrix regarding the content of the debater's speeches when it comes to parliamentary debate, because everything that is given there would not need not be elaborated. No, there's no elaboration needed for those that I've written here, because they basically tell you, no, what are the content of the speeches when it comes to the debaters in parliamentary debate. Okay, so just read the matrix again. I'm going to ask you to read the matrix, no, and then let's proceed to the role of the audience. Okay, there are when it comes to the audience, they have no role. No, in all of these debates that we have here, in LD debate, in Oregon Oxford debate, and parliamentary debate. Now let me answer why. For LD debate, they already have the cross-examination there, so there's no need for the audience to be asking questions already, because they already have the cross-examination. Same thing with Oregon Oxford. They have the interpellation, which is a form of which is just the same. It has the same form as cross-examination, no? And they also have rebuttaling, okay? So there's no need for the audience to be asking questions either. Now for parliamentary debate, they already have, the minorities already have representations, right? So the opposition and the governing bodies have their representatives in the debate. So there's no need, again, to be asking questions or to be raising questions from the audience, okay? So those are the rationalizations as to why audience is not included or has no role in all of these debates that I've mentioned here. Now let's go to the judges. Who are the judges? In LD debates, they have 1 or 3 judges, okay? And they watch out for spreading, okay? I'm not mispronouncing it, it's spreading, okay? So let me talk more about that later in the next slides. When it comes to Oregon Oxford, we have the Board of Judges, okay? They are also called adjudicators, okay? Parliamentary debate, they have 3 judges as well. The main judge or the chief judge would be called chair, and then the other would be called panelists, not the other 2. Now let's have how is or are the winners or winners determined? Okay, for other debates, the debaters are rated from 1 to 30, and then debaters are evaluated by their analysis, use of evidence, and ability to effectively and persuasively organize, deliver, and refute arguments. For Oregon-Oxford, it's clear here that we have 4 criteria. We have evidence, delivery, interpolation, and rebuttal. For parliamentary debate, these also include some of the possible criteria that the judges may watch out for. Okay, winners are determined based on arguments' strength, style, and engagement with opposing arguments. Other criteria includes the persuasiveness and relevance of arguments, the strategic development of points, and effective rebuttal against opposing teams. Okay, so those how the winners are determined in each of these debates here. Now, let's have the special features. I've mentioned about spreading in Lincoln Douglas. When we say spreading, it is a short term for speed reading. Okay, so spreading is not, it's a violation committed by debaters when they read rapidly their speech. I think the debaters are given warnings, and if they don't heed or if they don't follow this particular principle, because they give so much emphasis on their communication principle, then they would lose that round or the debate perhaps. Okay, for Oregon-Oxford, there's nothing more that I can point out when it comes to its special features or what makes it different, because I've already mentioned them for you. They have the team captain, they have the combination of they have the rebuttal, and they have the cross-examination. Okay, so I think you just have to point them out yourselves. We also have parliamentary debate. Okay, this is where you might be asking, where is the cross-examination in parliamentary debate, or where does their rebuttaling take place? Okay, for parliamentary debate, they have this point of information. When we say point of information, it is done by raising someone's or the opposing debater's hand, and they would say point of information if they want something to be clarified, or if they just want to really ask questions to the debater who is giving the speech. Okay, so they would raise the hand, and if the speaker wants to accept that POI or point of information, they would say yes please, and if they want to reject that POI, then they can say no thank you. When we say heckling, it can also be done in parliamentary debate. Okay, when we say heckling, it is a spontaneous comment made by the opposing team to someone's speech. Okay, but it has to be meaningful, it has to be purposeful. Like for example, I think I have an example here. For example, the speaker would say, our economy has achieved a 5% growth rate in the past 2 months. Then one of the opposing debater would say, false, it's 3%. So that's heckling. You immediately correct that particular information committed by the opposing team. So that's the idea of heckling. Without being, you just really there. It seems like you're there to interrupt the speaker, but really you're just there to correct the information. So that's heckling. So I think that's everything that you need to know regarding these 3. Okay. So again, you just can you can go back. You can scan the matrix again. So for you to be able to have deeper idea or comprehensive idea regarding these 3. Because what we have here is somewhat summarized already. Okay, so now let's proceed to the task number 2, which is named Shades of My Special Features. Okay, so on your last, I want you to focus on the task number 2 there. Okay, so answer the next task. First, illustrate the floor setup of each type of debate discussed. Okay, and then after that, list down the features that make each type of debate different from the other 2 types. Okay, so on the very first one, you have to illustrate the floor setup using basic shapes. And the next one, you have to point out the special features. What makes that particular type of debate different from the other 2 types of debates. Okay, so you have an example there under Lincoln Douglas debate. So you just have to continue answering that task, okay? So you may pause the video and start answering that, and then after you're done, you may go back to the video. Okay, so now that you're done answering that one, so your floor setup could look like this. No, for Lincoln Douglas, we have 1-on-1, and then we have for Oregon Oxford, of course, we have 4-on-4. No, we have the speaker on necessity, beneficiality, practicability, and we have the team captain at the very end of the seats. And then we have the debate moderator, no? And we also have the parliamentary debate, of course, 4-on-4 still, and they would actually, this is quite of the setup good when it comes to the parliamentary debate, no? So it's 4-on-4 still, no? And we have the governing side, the governing bodies on the other side, on one side, and the minorities, the representatives of the minorities on the another side, okay? So that's for parliamentary debate. Now let's have some enriching questions, because you might be having these questions earlier. So what is the difference between a resolution and a motion? So can they be used interchangeably? When we say resolution, let's have some examples here. For example, allowing China to, this LIBRT, it stands for Let It Be Resolved that allowing China to explore the West Philippine Sea is unconstitutional. When we say resolution, it is already resolved. Now, it is up for the debaters if they should agree to that decision made in the resolution. Okay, so they already deemed it to be unconstitutional. Now, it's up for the debaters if they would agree if it's constitutional or no, it's still constitutional. Okay, so that's resolution. But when we say motion, it's more of a proposal. No, let's have it here. The THW stands for this House would propose. Okay, so THW would propose a 2-day school week to the President. Okay, so this is a proposal, yeah, no, to be discussed, to be further discussed within the parliamentary. Okay, so that's the difference between the two. Now let's have another enriching question here. What is the difference between a rebuttal speech and a cross-examination round in terms of their intent in a debate? In terms of format, rebuttal speech is more of arguments, of course, so sentences, no? And cross-examination, it is the cycle of giving or throwing questions and, of course, answering the questions by saying or by answering yes or no, and expounding the answer when you're asked to expound it. Okay, so that's the nature of cross-examination and rebuttal speech, and they do have the same intent, not to expose error or to point out fallacies or to obtain admission of the opposing team to side on your team. So they do have the same intent, but when it comes to the format, no, rebuttal speech, it's more on attacking the arguments made by the opposing team, whilst the cross-examination round, you bring the questions to their table as to for example, if you have things to be clarified, or if you really want to just prove to the judge that you can that your side, the side that you're defending, is the better side or the best side to be defended, or it's basically just the factual side that everyone should be in. Okay, so that's for cross-examination round. Okay, so for cross-examination round. Okay, so let's have task number 3 for am I a good debater? So am I a good debater? This is not part of your last. It's not part of your last. So this is just a discussion, but it's in a form of a task. Okay, so a checklist will be presented on the next slides. Each statement either makes you a good and respectful debater or not. Your task is to identify if you should follow each of the statements or not, and we will justify why so. Okay, so these are just justify or answer in your mind. Okay, so let's have first, I should be able to analyze my subject and determine what it means and all its possible implications. If your answer is yes, I should have this quality, you're basically right. Okay, So you should be able to know the subject, the resolution that is assigned to you. Define each key term there, and then you should also contextualize the definition that you've given to each key term in the context of the resolution. Okay, so that's how you do it. That's how you dissect and take everything together to define a resolution. I must focus on analyzing the proofs of my opponents to recognize the weak and strong points that they might present. So if your answer is yes, then you're probably also correct. No? You must be able to analyze or expect the arguments that will be thrown to you. But we should also add that we must also expect that the arguments that we have prepared to the opposing team will also be attacked, and we must also be able to defend our arguments. Okay, we have to expect that. So basically, you just don't analyze the arguments of the opposing team, but you also need to analyze your own. Okay, your own arguments that you have prepared, and must be able to defend them. Okay. Next, I must present my case with simplicity and clarity, as I will not be able to restate them during my speech. Again, if your answer is yes, then you're correct. Okay, so you have to present your case with simplicity and clarity, because you might not get the chance again to speak to the audience or to the opposing team or to the judges. Okay, so you might not have the same opportunity as you were given in your first speech. So you have to present your case with simplicity and clarity, especially in LD debates, because they have this communication principle that the speakers should not talk rapidly in their speech, right? So let's have another. I must develop and assume qualities of leadership such as sincerity, earnestness, enthusiasm, and conviction. So these qualities here are all positive. So if your answer is yes, then you must you're correct. No, you must have or develop these qualities, no, which falls under the leadership. No, leadership. Okay. Let's have another. I must be able to project to my audience how I reached the conclusions I am presenting by leading them along the same path, bringing them to the conclusions I desire. So when it comes to it, pertains to the logicality, no, or the flow of your speech. You have to drag your audience along with you as to how you were able to reach that conclusion. No, as much as possible, do it logically. No, structure your speech logically, if applicable, sequentially. No, so that it would not be difficult for your readers to follow along your speech. Okay, so just be logical and yet. Next, we have, I must not rely on my prepared speech. I should follow the development of the debate and effectively determine what necessary adjustments I should make and how should I present them. So if your answer is yes, I should do this, then you're correct. No, you must not rely on your prepared speech only, unless you're the very first speaker of the affirmative, right? So if you're not, then you have to follow the development. You have to adjust your speech accordingly to the development of the debate. So if they were able to throw some arguments that you were not able to expect that they would throw to your team, then you make adjustments. Okay, you make adjustments with your speech so that you must be able to address Mangkod, no, because that's the idea of rebuttaling. You have to address those arguments. Okay, so you have to adjust your speech. Next is, my words should be forceful and should touch the hearts and minds of my audience. No, we are going back to the elements of an argument. No, it has to be convincing. So we should touch the mind of the audience, and it should also be persuasive. No, we should appeal to their emotions, so we should touch the hearts of the audience. So it's basically this one. It's correct as well. You should also embody this. Okay. Now let's have the three last ones. Okay. For the last three, I want all of you to read all of these on your own, and then answer on your last the questions. What are the ethical responsibilities of debaters based on the three statements? Why is it important to observe them during any debate proceeding? Okay, so based on the three statements here, explain as to why is it necessary to have these three, to observe these three, as part of our ethical responsibilities as a debater, as debaters, okay? So you can answer it in 3 to 5 sentences as well. So you may do that. You may pause the video and then go back to the video after you're done answering. So now that you're done with your answer to these questions, let's go back to the statements. Okay, so the first one, I must present accurate information, not misrepresent facts, and avoid using deceptive arguments. Of course, you have to observe accuracy of information. Okay, because we need to not fabricate our information just because we want to defend the stand we are defending. No, we should not fabricate information. We should not misrepresent them, and they should not be deceptive in nature. So they should be accurate. No, just base your arguments on actual accurate information. Now let's have another. I must treat my opponents, judges, and audience with respect by listening carefully, not interrupting anyone, and avoiding personal attacks or using foul language. Of course, you have to respect the facilitators of the debate, the timer, the time limit, the decision of the judges, and also the questions that they throw to you, especially in Oregon Oxford, because we have that. We also have that portion where the judges would ask each debater one question, right? We also have who else? The audience, of course, So we also need to be able to respect them. And one way of doing it is the third one. I must ensure that my arguments promote constructive discourse and do not perpetuate harmful stereotypes, encourage violence, or contribute to misinformation. Of course, your argument should be sensitive enough. It should not offend groups of people, in your audience. Okay, and it must not also encourage violence, or it must not contribute to misinformation, and it should not perpetuate harmful stereotypes. So those are our ethical responsibilities as debaters when we attend or when we participate in any debate proceeding. Okay, so I think those are very easy to understand. So let's have another enriching question here. So redirecting to the very first statement in our task here. So let's have it here. How do you properly analyze a resolution or motion in order to determine what it means and all its possible implications? Okay, I'm going to be showing you one video of how you would be able to do that. Okay, so I want you to watch this video.
Everyone has the right to be presumed innocent until proven guilty, and no one should be subjected to an arbitrary violation of property. Because a compulsory DNA database turns a country of citizens into a nation of suspects without probable cause, I affirm that resolves compulsory inclusion of non-felons' DNA in any government database is unjust. To further clarify, I offer the following definitions. Compulsory, being coercive by means of force. Non-felon, any individual in a society not convicted of a felony. Unjust, that which is done against the rights of another. DNA database. According to the Thomas M. Cooley Law Review of 2003, a DNA database has been defined as a storehouse for genetic records which law enforcement agencies use for criminal identification purposes.
Okay. So the resolution here involved here is the compulsory inclusion of non-felons' DNA in any government database is unjust. So they deem that unjust. Now, this being the resolution, the speaker was able to define each of the key terms there that are very essential to understanding the resolution. Okay, and at the very end, he actually pointed out that he was able to get that definition from a research, or an article. So that's one way of doing, or on how you would be able to analyze each resolution that you debate about. Okay, and actually the definition by its meaning, by giving its meaning, can also be a point of debate, in any debate. So you should also be able to watch out for that. Okay. So I think that's everything for that task. Okay, so now let's proceed to the task number 4, which is watching an Oregon-Oxford debate. I have included this in one of my preparatory materials for your for this lesson, last Monday. And if you have watched that video there attached, then you should not watch this one at all. You would proceed to answering the task number 4 there in your last. So scan the QR code provided. It will link you to a video that broadcasts a debate between University of San Carlos and University of the Philippines on a certain resolution. Watch the entirety of the video and complete the matrix on your last by describing how each area was done. Okay, so here is the QR code, and if it doesn't work, then you can go back to the announcement I did or I announced last Monday, and you may watch the video there. Okay, because I attached it there. Now for those who are done watching it, so you have to scan through the videos or the speeches of each debaters and then answer your last. Okay, fill out your last. Now that's for your task number 4, which is the application part. Task number 5. Okay, so this is your assessment. Unfortunately, you have to submit it today. Okay, today, Judsia, because this is an assessment. Okay, so if you have no time for answering your matrix, you may leave it blank for now, and then anyway, submission Mansad-Ana is November 17, right? So you may attend to the assessment first. Okay, so for the assessment, scan the QR code provided in the next slide, and it will link you to the assessment. So it's in a Google form for this lesson. Okay, so read the respective instructions for each section. Okay, so there are respective instructions for each part of that assessment. So just read them. You can easily answer it again. And then deadline today, at 9 p.m. We have here this QR code, and I also have attached it on this particular announcement together with this video. So you may go with that announcement and then click the Google form. Now for the I also need to announce, well, I think it has already been announced last Tuesday, that your performance task for the second periodic or the second quarter is going to be an online debate using modified Oregon-Oxford format. Okay, and that will be held on November 21, 2024. And the details as to as to the themes, the topics, and the role assignments, even the rubrics are there in the attached document. So you just really need to read that document so that you would be able to know the entirety of the expectations you must meet for your performance task. Okay, so if you do have questions or concerns regarding this video lesson and regarding the performance task, you may leave them on the comment section, and I'll attend to them as immediately as possible. Okay, so I think that's everything for now. Thank you.